coast to coast. It is Friday, January the 21st. I am your host, Jon Cohen, covering the news in our nation this week from sea to shining sea. The first anniversary of something is usually a very special time. If you're married, your first anniversary was a time in which you both looked at one another with elation and joy and recalled the love that brought you together. Your first birthday. Though most of us don't remember our first birthday, we have photos of how much fun it was. At my first birthday, my mother baked a huge cake. All my family were gathered around, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. There were tons of gifts. I had cake smeared all over my face with a huge smile. It was truly the best of times. What about your first year as President of the United States? You look back and remember, or in the case of Joe Biden, try to remember after taking your daily Prevagen. You remember those all-important first 100 days where you signed over 60 executive actions to simply undo all of your predecessors' policies, even the good ones like border security, thus resulting in tens of thousands of illegal aliens flooding into the United States. You signed a COVID relief bill into law for $1.9 trillion, of which only 9% actually went to COVID relief. You pulled out of Afghanistan and stranded tens of thousands of not only Afghan allies, but American citizens as well, leaving the country to fall prey to a sadistic and evil regime where people are now literally selling babies for food. You spend more money than has ever been printed, thus causing 40-year inflation. You accuse an entire political party and tens of millions of Americans of being racists and bigots and Jim Crow-like Confederates. And last but certainly not least, you plummet in approval polls from the 50s to the 30s in less than 12 months. Now, that's quite a first year as president. It is truly astonishing to watch in real time a president fall on his face quite as badly as has Joe Biden. Now, we have had some very unpopular presidents in American history, many of whom occupied the last 50 years of our nation's history. In fact, Donald Trump was a hugely unpopular president. Never during his presidency were his approval ratings in the black. But never did he fall as far from grace as has Joe Biden. Remember, folks, this is a president who, when he took office 1 year ago this week, he had approval numbers in the 50s, even 60s by some polls. And by virtually every metric available, he has fallen into the low 40s, or in the case of the Quinnipiac poll, which we've talked about, the low 30s. He's vastly unpopular with conservatives, independents, and even most Democrats now, who are staring these numbers in the face and just have no words to cover up the atrociousness of his performance. Case in point, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is asked about Joe Biden's performance and his running for re-election in 2024, and her response is just priceless.
About 2024, do you believe that President Biden is up for the job?
President Biden's running for re-election. I expect to support him.
His approval ratings are some of the lowest that they've been for a very long time.
I understand that, but remember, we've just finished the first quarter. We're just starting into the second quarter here.
He's running for re-election. President Biden is running for re-election. He's running. Yeah, Democrats are all running for the hills after this first year. I have to say, it's truly jaw-dropping when a president is relegated to lame duck status after year one. By year 4, we expect it, but after year 1, not so much. And members of his own party are just jumping off the ship before it sinks. Here's Tim Ryan distancing himself from the president.
The president, we need the administration to lead the way. They're in charge. The buck stops there. There's no doubt about that. And we need to get things done. We're not doing good enough. We're 2 years into this thing, and I think that the frustration level is getting to people here.
And do you blame President Biden for that frustration?
Well, I mean, the president is the president, and there's no question that he bears some responsibility for it.
Yeah, not good for Joe Biden. So the other day, I'm watching the 2013 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and one of the groups inducted that year was the Canadian rock band Rush. And during the acceptance speech segment of the awards, Alex Lifeson, who played guitar for the band, proceeds to give a 5-minute speech where he just says blah, blah, blah the entire time. It's actually pretty hilarious. He's basically poking fun at how no one really cares about what you say during a Hall of Fame acceptance speech. And it's kind of always the same crap. Here's just a brief blurb from Alex Lifeson's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction speech.
Blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah.
So I really think Joe Biden's speechwriter should do the same thing for the president right now, except replace blah, blah, blah with suck, suck, suck. And so it goes something like, come on, man. Suck, 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 suck. I suck, suck, suck. Come on, man. I suck, 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 suck. And I say this because Joe Biden giving speeches has honestly been the catalyst for his downfall. If you recall during the 2020 election, Joe Biden hung out in the basement for weeks on end. At times we were almost like, where's Waldo? Where's Joe Biden? Where's he gone? This guy would cancel pressers all the time. And meanwhile, Donald Trump continued in classic Donald Trump fashion with diarrhea of the mouth. It's fake news, guys. I mean, I'm the Donald, and you're not. Fake news, fake news. And all of us on the right were like, okay, just stop talking and force Biden to talk. If he speaks, the American people will see just how inept he is. But of course, Trump didn't. And Biden took home the bacon because he spoke less. But now he's the president. And try as you may, you can only stay hidden for so long before the press starts looking for you. So he started giving speeches, and it has been disastrous for him.
Is ready to deliver change we desperately need. A man I'm proud to call my friend. A man who will be the next president of the United States, Barack America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, Barack Obama. We can speak out and be more straightforward. I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom.
Hillary Clinton is as qualified or more qualified than I am to be Vice President of the United States of America. Let's get that straight. And quite frankly, it might have been a better pick than me, but she's first rate.
I know I'm called middle class, Joe. It's not meant as a compliment. Means I'm not sophisticated. I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on it, let's do push-ups together, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do.
To the word united. To the number 30330. 30 330 or
30. Oh, okay. Well, I could play Biden speech gaffes all day long, and they would never get old from their level of hilarity. But gaffes aside, the real thing that is truly mind-boggling to examine in regard to Biden's presidency is his ability, as Obama once said, to F up all the positive things he was handed. All of us, even on the right, looked at Biden's presidency and we said, okay, if he can stay away from the far left wing of his party, his presidency will probably be a moderate success, a slightly moderate success, based solely on the fact that he walked into a situation which was teed up for success. He inherited a COVID vaccine. He inherited a COVID distribution plan, even though he lied that he didn't. He was given an economy that was artificially comatose due to COVID and could only go up. The situation in Afghanistan was stable. The border was fairly secure due to Trump's stringent border policies, and he just took a giant dump on all of it. As I said the other day, if he'd embraced that which he ran on, moderation, he'd still be in the 50s right now, hands down. So the other day, the White House communications team, who should all be fired for gross incompetence, decided, you know what a great idea would be? Let's put President Cream of Wheat on television for 2 hours and let him field questions from the press corps. Now, I will tell you, this is about as good an idea as pissing on an electric fence. And in classic Joe Biden fashion, he never fails to fail at speeches. So we're going to go through the highlight questions and the abysmal answers your geriatric president provides.
Overpromise to the American public what you could achieve in your first year in office, and how do you plan to course correct going forward?
Why are you such an optimist? Look, I didn't overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen. The fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where we have made enormous progress.
Okay, so for starters, anyone who thinks that Joe Biden is a nice guy, he's not. He's a schmucky guy. Case in point, he goes, "Why are you such an why are you such an opportunist, man? I mean, come on, man. Why are you such an opportunist?" I mean, but then he goes on to say he has outperformed what? What, outperformed a third grade spelling bee? He hasn't outperformed anything. And he's been handed more difficulty than any other president. I can think of a few presidents that might have been handed, I don't know, greater crises in their lifetime. I don't know, like Abraham Lincoln. I know, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, I can think of a few. I'm sorry, you had every opportunity to excel and you fell flat on your face. But our esteemed president continues.
Who is just trying to figure out, as I said, how to take care of their family, put three squares on the table, stay safe, be able to pay their mortgage or their rent, etc., is becoming much more informed on the motives of some of the political players and some of the political parties.
I mean, I was waiting for the theme from Jeopardy to start playing during the silent moments of that. Oh my God! And you wonder why Joe Biden should not be giving speeches. That is precisely it's like that scene when Andy Kaufman is on the television show and he's staring into the camera, and everyone's just like, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? And of course, then he starts playing the theme from Mighty Mouse. Joe Biden. But if that wasn't bad enough, that he just basically rambles on and stares at the camera in silence for minutes on end, he's then asked about his mental fitness.
You suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? Thank you.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea what's my name again? Where am I? Yeah, I have no idea. It is truly the overarching theme for his presidency. Oh my God. But wait, there's more.
Been much on any incoming president's plate that's been a bigger menu than the plate I had given to me. I'm not complaining. Knew that running in. And the fact of the matter is we got an awful lot done. An awful lot done. And there's more to get done. But look, let me ask a rhetorical question. No, I won't.
What is he doing? It's just so painful to watch. Let me ask a rhetorical question. Wait, what's a rhetorical question again? Oh my God. And remember that time when Donald Trump used to say that polls they're fake news, guys, they're fake news. Yeah, well, I feel like Joe Biden's taking a page out of Trump's book, because that's what he says now.
Plan to win back moderates and independents who cast a ballot for you in 2020, but polls indicate aren't happy with the way you're doing your job now.
I don't believe the polls.
Oh, the polls, they're all fake. He doesn't believe them. Well, he's going to believe them in 2024 when he gets his ass handed to him, because, yeah, I'm sorry. When you're polling in the 30s and you're just like, I don't believe it, man. What are you talking about? Polls, what? Oh, my God. But he continues on. And This next question is truly mind-bending when you consider that if you are a Democrat right now and Joe Biden says this in a speech, you need to start running. Run as we speak, because he's coming. He's coming for you. He's coming to help you. Yeah.
Going to be deeply involved in these off-year elections.
Uh-oh.
We're going to be raising a lot of money. We're going to be out there making sure that we're helping all of those candidates, and scores of them have already asked me to come in and campaign with.
Okay, the only people that have asked you to come in and help them are people like Ilhan Omar and AOC, who are in the bluest of blue districts where a monkey on the moon in a condo could win in their district as long as they have a D beside their name. Okay, but if you are a congressperson in a purple district, like let's say in Virginia, you're like the actors in that Bounty paper towel commercial where the spill occurs and the liquid is quickly approaching you, and you're like, no, no, please do not come help me. I do not need or want your help. I am just going to lose. I am going to have to go back to my job at Ace Hardware if you come and try to help me get reelected to Congress. Yeah, Joe really should have stayed in the West Wing and watched reruns of the Andy Griffith Show. Not good. Speaking of something that's really not good, how about the economy? As we've said before, you can flub on a lot of things, but when you start dipping into people's wallets, they ain't voting for you. So the Fed has, of course, announced that they are going to hike interest rates 3, if not 4 times this year. Some analysts say that interest rates may need to increase as high as to 6% to quell rising inflation. And much of the reason for this is a complete debauchery of fiscal policy in terms of cash in circulation. We've discussed this before. The primary driving factor behind inflation are too many dollars chasing too few goods. And there are 2 major economic schools of thought in regard to this, and they are the Keynesian and the monetarist or monetarism. A Keynesian, named after John Maynard Keynes, the British economist, says you need to pump money into the economy as a catalyst to jumpstart the economy, right? So spend, spend, spend. Conversely, monetarism, a school of thought developed by Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago, says you have to control the amount of money in circulation to regulate inflation. All right, so spend money or regulate money. I'm going to let you take a guess as to what school of thought the economists in the Biden administration fall into. So your esteemed president, who lives in the land of Fantasia, where everything is just hunky-dory, is asked about his continuation of blowing out the spending.
Guaranteed control of Washington for 1 more year before the midterms. Do you need to be more realistic and scale down these priorities in order to get something passed?
No, I don't think so. When you say more realistic, I think it's extremely realistic to say to people, because let me back up.
Beep, beep, beep. He's backing up. He's backing up, folks. He's backing up because he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. All right, this is a president, and I will say this for the umpteenth thousandth time, was elected to be a moderate, and he whored himself out to Bernie Sanders and the radical left wing of the party, and he has just proceeded to spend more money than has ever been printed in the history of humanity. But he's got to double down on it now. He's just going to continue to spend money, despite the fact that that Jerome Powell has even said, stop spending money. Okay, this debt is getting out of control. It's unsustainable. But it doesn't matter. And then when asked about the supply chain crisis, he goes back to my very first podcast where I talked about him blaming car prices for inflation. He goes back to this stupid argument yet again, that car prices are the reason for inflation. No, they're not.
Inflation has everything to do with the supply chain. And I think what you're seeing is that we've been able to make progress on speeding up the access to materials. For example, 1/3 of the increase in cost of living is the cost of automobiles.
Oh my God, here we go. Automobiles. Listen, the supply chain crisis is under your purview. You have a Secretary of Transportation who took a 2-month paternity leave when he and his partner, okay, who happens to be a man, who did not give birth to a child, decides, you know what would be a great idea? Let me take 2 months off from work to sit home and, deal with my partner who actually didn't have to go through childbirth while our nation is on the brink of a supply chain crisis, while ships are literally sitting in harbors at ports and can't dock to offload their cargo. That sounds like a great idea. And you've got this doddering old idiot saying, well, come on, man, it's not our fault. It's 100% your fault. You are the president. Own it. But see, he won't own it. He won't own it because it's not his fault. It's everyone else's fault. But now, and speaking of everyone else's fault, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of the speech. I, of course, am talking about elections. So, for the past several weeks, Joe Biden and his nincompoop sidekick, Kamala Harris, have been on a Democratic Party propaganda tour. And unlike other tours, like a traveling rock band or the circus where joy and smiles are brought to people's faces, this tour brings but one thing and one thing only: the revelation that if you don't want to federalize elections, you're, wait for it, a racist. Now, not just any racist. You're a racist of the most sinister caliber, like George Wallace, Bull Connor, and Jefferson Davis. In fact, the president is asked about these ridiculous comments, and it is truly eye-opening to watch Joe Biden try to slither his way out of this one.
Know that you dispute the characterization that you called folks who would oppose those voting bills as being Bull Connor or George Wallace, but you said that they would be sort of in the same camp.
No, I didn't say that. Look what I said.
Yeah, you did.
Go back and read what I said and tell me if you think I called anyone who voted on the side of the position taken by Bull Connor that they were Bull Connor.
Oh, he's getting angry. You won't like Joseph Biden when he gets angry. Okay. He literally said in the speech, do you want to be on the side of Martin Luther King or George Wallace? Of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Okay, I don't know how much clearer you can state that basically if you're not for me, you're against me. If you're not on my side, you're on the side of segregationists and racists and Confederates. I mean, he's literally just trying to say, you know what? I didn't say that. And we see politicians do this all the time. I didn't say that. I know you just played me the clip, but that's not me. I didn't say that. You literally said that. Okay. I have generally been a critic of former President Trump stating that the election was stolen. I know this will be unpopular with some of you listening, but I do not believe that over 5 million votes were stolen. However, what I do believe is that certain states, such as Pennsylvania, illegally changing their voting laws, and the press, who was clearly complicit in helping Joe Biden win, was a factor in the election stacked against Donald Trump. Anyone with 2 eyes and 2 ears could see such bias in the press when Donald Trump is getting drilled during the debates by Savannah Guthrie. And meanwhile, George Stephanopoulos is asking Joe Biden, does he prefer chocolate chip or rocky road? But apparently what's good for the goose is now good for the gander, because you have the Democratic Party and Joe Biden making the ridiculous accusation and claim that if they cannot federalize all elections from now until the end of time, then all elections from now until the end of time are illegitimate.
Speaking of voting rights legislation, if this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election.
Okay, this is literally the kind of talk that starts actual insurrections and civil wars. I know we've been led to believe that Viking actors and racist rednecks storming the Capitol were the near end of our democracy, but this kind of rhetoric will literally end republics. For any sitting president to say that future elections are illegitimate unless he and his party get to pass federal legislation and take power away from the states, which is granted to them by the Constitution, is authoritarianism 101. I mean, this is the kind of crap you see in Venezuela. And Joe Biden wonders why he's hugely unpopular, increasingly unpopular with Hispanics, especially in Florida, why they don't vote for him, because they've seen this stuff before. They left it. They came here to get away from it. And as if it wasn't bad enough to say it once, Joe Biden had to say it twice.
They would in any way be illegitimate?
Oh, yeah, I think it easily could be illegitimate. Imagine if, in fact, Trump has succeeded in convincing Pence to not count the votes. Imagine if...
In regards to 2022, sir, the midterm
2022. I mean, imagine if those attempts to say that the count was not legit. You have to recount it, or we're not going to count. We're going to discard the following votes. I mean, sure.
It's truly amazing. So he's asked the question, right? Do you think that the elections will be illegitimate? Without skipping a beat, he goes, yeah, of course. Yeah, they'll be illegitimate. And his entire answer is centered around the possibility of future elections being basically thrown out by the Congress because they don't like the results. And yet, when Mitch McConnell and other congressional Republicans wanted to re-examine, even reform the Electoral Count Act of 1887, it was dismissed by Democrats. That is the very law which deals with this sort of thing, and it was rejected by Democrats. Because in the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. They don't care about bipartisanship, constitutional adherence, or safer elections. They care about top-down control, exacting the very corruption which they claim to oppose. But what comes next in his speech, I believe, is setting the United States up for unparalleled disaster. But before we get to that, I must first pose a question to all of you, and that is, are you tired of establishment media only providing you one side of the story? Ready for a fresh new perspective with hard-hitting facts and truth, spliced with humor and sarcastic wit through a conservative lens? Then you've come to the right place. Coast to Coast, the conservative podcast, is available on all major apps, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. You can also check us out online at Coast to Coast. That's COAST, the number 2, COAST.buzzsprout.com. And I know I've been saying it, but we are coming to YouTube very soon. Please subscribe today. So if you go back and look at history, it is replete with repetition, not only in terms of events, but also in terms of actors. So if we took a poll right now of American presidents, best to worst, based solely on poll numbers alone, Joe Biden would certainly be down at the bottom of the list. And I think this will inevitably be his legacy. History will not be kind to Joe Biden as president of the United States. Another person that history has not been kind to is Neville Chamberlain, who is consistently considered one of the worst prime ministers in British history. Now, for those of you who have forgotten your World War II history from high school, Neville Chamberlain was the British prime minister leading up to and at the beginning of the Second World War. He served from 37 to 40. He, of course, was succeeded by the greatest of British prime ministers, Sir Winston Churchill. So, the juxtaposition of Chamberlain as an unpopular prime minister to Churchill as a very popular wartime prime minister is much akin to James Buchanan, who was president leading up to the Civil War, hugely unpopular president, to Abraham Lincoln, president during the Civil War, and the greatest, if not the second greatest president of all time, only to George Washington. Neville Chamberlain is one of those tragic figures in political history because he was never really great at anything and yet managed to forge an entire career out of politics. Much like Biden, he was never that popular or even well known. Of course, in Biden's case, his meteoric rise to fame is because Barack Obama plucked him from his obscurity, basically, and selected him as his running mate. And we see people like this all the time. Lifelong politicians who never really accomplish anything meaningful, but are enamored with the fact that they are in a position of prominence. In fact, if you look at some of our greatest presidents, conversely, if you look at some of our greatest presidents, like George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, they had little or no political background. And in the case of Washington, really disfavored politics and power. So Chamberlain became president at the age of 68, which made him the second oldest prime minister in the 20th century. In fact, I was looking at the ages of British prime ministers yesterday, and I was astounded that John Major, Tony Blair, and David Cameron were all in their 40s while they were prime minister. Even Boris Johnson, the current prime minister, is only 55. We really need to take a page out of the British playbook and start electing some younger presidents. But if you compare Chamberlain with Biden, they are basically both at the end of their political careers when they become leader of their respective governments. Chamberlain, however, is most famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, for his constant capitulation and appeasement of Hitler before World War II. You may recall that the Nazis were building a military-industrial complex, and they had displayed signs of aggression and imperialism, so the other European nations were rightfully worried. They had recently come out of the First World War with Germany, and they didn't want to go through the same ordeal again. So Chamberlain began conciliating to Hitler. When Hitler wanted the Sudetenland, which was a region bordering Germany that contained 3 million ethnic Germans but was claimed by Czechoslovakia, Chamberlain acquiesced. He signed the Munich Agreement in 1938, ceding this territory to Hitler. And at this point, Hitler knew he had Chamberlain where he wanted him. The one thing that history has taught us about dictators is they don't appreciate courtesy or placation. They exploit it. Give them an inch and they will take a yard. So aside from being a villain from a Bond film, Vladimir Putin is effectively a dictator. And the parallels that we are seeing between Ukraine and Russia and the Sudetenland and Germany are uncanny. And just like Chamberlain, the appeasement of Joe Biden to people like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, I believe, will potentially lead to either war or certainly our relegation on the international stage as a second-rate military power. And when asked about Russia's potential invasion of Ukraine, this is what Neville Biden had to say.
I'm not so sure he is certain what he's going to do. My guess is he will move in. He has to do something.
He has to do something? No, he doesn't. He can sit there on the border and play Scrabble. But you, as our idiotic commander-in-chief, are going to make the assertion that he must do something. And therefore, we anticipate he will do something. And guess what? Now, he will probably do something. I mean, unbelievable. But if there is one sentence, one statement in all of this speech that really summarizes the ineptness of Joe Biden as your esteemed president, it's what comes next.
What you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
I swear, this guy is Neville Chamberlain reincarnate. Maybe even worse. A minor incursion? Remember when Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin had their meeting in Geneva, Switzerland back in June of last year? You know, the meeting where Joe Biden was sort of wandering around like a lost tourist, walking through outdoor cafes, sort of waving at everyone like an old geriatric who's lost his mind. And at that meeting, we were all gobsmacked that he actually gave Vladimir Putin a list of everything that was off limits for Russians to cyber attack in the United States. And we were all like, whoa, this guy is a complete imbecile. Well, I think this tops that. A minor incursion? What the hell does that even mean? Mexico, if you invade southern Arizona and reclaim it as part of Mexico, we'll consider that a minor incursion and won't do anything. Wrongo. We'd kick the ever-living crap out of Mexico. Since when is it acceptable for a nation to invade another foreign nation? Period. This is the primary reason why wars are fought. Hell, this is the reason that every year, even here in the United States, people are shot for trespassing on another person's property. Like Neville Chamberlain giving the green light to Hitler, Biden has just given the green light to Putin. And don't be surprised if this develops into all-out war. Empires, great military powers throughout history, all suffer from the same issue at some point: bad leadership. An army, like a football team, are only as good as their commander or their coach. Once you begin to placate to the opposition, you lose. Joe Biden has unequivocally displayed his lack of grit to the world. That's why Russia and China and Iran are conducting joint military exercises. They are the new triple entente of evil. They smell blood in the water, and like a pack of bloodthirsty sharks, they're going in for the kill. But remember, America, we asked for this. We were so sick of mean tweets from the mean bad orange man that we needed a geriatric fool to lead us. Well, we got what we asked for good and hard. And if you're wondering why the press has been clamping down on Biden lately, it's not by accident. So way back in March of last year, Tom Jones over at the Washington Post wrote an interesting article about media ratings and how they related to Trump no longer being president. This is what he had to say. Former President Donald Trump used to say he was the best thing that ever happened to the media. I'm the best thing ever. Remember this quote from 2017. Quote, newspapers, television, all forms of media will tank if I'm not there, because without me, the ratings are going down the tubes. Was he right? The Washington Post's Paul Farhi writes that, yeah, maybe he was. Farhi wrote, quote, barely 2 months into the post-Trump era, news outlets are indeed losing much of the audience and readership they gained during his chaotic presidency. In other words, journalism's Trump bump may be giving way to a slump, end of quote. Farhi crunched the numbers and came up with some data to back his argument. The nation's top mainstream news sites, including the Post and the New York Times, saw traffic drop dramatically in February after setting records in January. This year's February, they're of course talking about 2021, was worse than last year's February. Farhi also accurately pointed out that cable news ratings are down. CNN's primetime audience is down 45% the past 5 weeks. MSNBC is down 26%. Even Fox News has dropped 6%. Echoing something that CNN's Brian Stelter recently told Jimmy Traina's Sports Illustrated media podcast, I find myself with several options for the lead of my newsletter each day, as opposed to it likely being about Trump's latest controversy. In fact, today is one of the rare days since the election that the lead and a few other items of the newsletter have been about Trump. Now, that was back in March of last year, and we fast forward to the present. Sure, the media can still talk about COVID ad nauseum, but even that's starting to get old, especially when everyone is finally accepting COVID for what it is, not as deadly and endemic. So, what do we talk about now, they ask? Yeah, you can talk about the occasional Trump rally, his involvement in January the 6th, or corruption at the Trump Organization, but his bugaboo status isn't what it used to be because he's not on Twitter or television every day as he once was. So what to do with all that dead time? Look to the only person you can, your floundering, inane president, Joe Biden. Let's be honest. The honeymoon is over. Once Joe Biden capitulated on Afghanistan and created an international debacle which had horrible imagery for the entire globe to witness, he began to lose the admiration of the press. A press who had so long supported and defended him. Now, even they were asking, is this what we signed up for? And as inflation runs rampant and poll numbers plummet, the press, like vultures searching for carrion, are starting to realize that the decaying corpse of Joe Biden might be their only food source. Would I go so far as to say that they secretly want Trump back for ratings? Maybe the cynical side of me would like to, but the realistic side says they don't want Trump back as much as they want something to be their headline. And for right now, that's Joe Biden. And if you're Joe Biden, you're the only deer in the forest with a pack of blood-hungry hunters searching for prey. So you better hope that their guns turn elsewhere from distraction. Otherwise, you're going to be mounted on their wall. Well, that's all we have for this week. We'll see you back here next week. Have a safe weekend. I am Jon Cohen, and this has been Coast to Coast